Sangre de Cristo Mountains, New Mexico. Winter 1873. The wind screamed across the mountainside, carrying ice crystals that stung like needles against exposed skin. Scarlett McAllister pulled her woolen scarf tighter around her face, leaving only her eyes visible. Eyes the color of spring leaves, now narrowed against the relentless assault of winter. The settlers' caravan had been crawling through the mountains for 3 days, each hour bringing them deeper into the storm's merciless grip. "We can't continue like this, Mr. Holloway," she shouted over the howling wind to the caravan's guide, a weather-beaten man whose confidence had diminished with each passing mile. "These people won't survive another night exposed." Jeremiah Holloway spat into the snow, his tobacco-stained spittle freezing almost instantly. "You think I don't know that, Miss McAllister? Unless you've got a hotel hidden in that wagon of yours, we ain't got much choice." Scarlett's jaw tightened beneath her scarf. 2 families had already lost children to fever, and the remaining 12 settlers, mostly women and children, were reaching their breaking point. The caravan had set out from Missouri with dreams of fertile land in Arizona territory. Now those dreams were being buried beneath the merciless snow. "There's an Apache settlement near here," Holloway muttered, his voice barely audible above the wind. "Jicarilla tribe. They know these mountains." "Indians?" Mrs. Peterson clutched her youngest child closer to her chest. "Surely they'll kill us all." "They'll kill us quicker than this storm?" Scarlett challenged, her Scottish accent thickening with emotion. "We have children dying, Mrs. Peterson. Whatever fears you harbor about the natives, I assure you the cold is a more certain killer." Scarlett had come to America 5 years earlier, after losing her parents and brother to consumption in Edinburgh. At 24, she had nothing left in Scotland but graves and painful memories. America promised a fresh start, though that promise had proven as harsh as it was hopeful. Holloway shook his head. "The Jicarilla don't welcome trespassers. These are sacred mountains to them." "Then we'll respect their ways," Scarlett insisted. "We need shelter, not conquest." After hours of desperate trudging through deepening snow, the faint glow of fires appeared through the trees. Holloway instructed everyone to halt while he approached the settlement with Scarlett, who had insisted on accompanying him despite his protests. The Apache camp consisted of several hide-covered dwellings arranged in a protective circle. Warriors materialized from the shadows as they approached, arrows nocked and faces impassive. One man stepped forward, tall and broad-shouldered, with obsidian eyes that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. His long black hair was tied back with a leather thong, and a single eagle feather rose from it. Intricate tattoos marked his chest where his buffalo hide coat opened. He carried himself with the quiet certainty of someone who never needed to raise his voice to command respect. "You trespass on Jicarilla land," he said in carefully measured English. "Why?" Holloway removed his hat, his hands trembling. Whether from cold or fear, Scarlett couldn't tell. "We seek shelter from the storm, sir. We have women and children who won't survive the night without it." The man's gaze moved past Holloway to Scarlett, and something cold yet electric passed between them. His eyes narrowed slightly, as if puzzled by her presence. "I am Atsila," he said finally, "chief of this band." Scarlett stepped forward, pulling down her scarf to speak clearly. "Our need is desperate, Chief Atsila. We ask for temporary shelter, nothing more. We will abide by your rules and offer fair trade for your hospitality." Atsila's expression didn't change, but his gaze intensified as it held hers. For a long moment, the only sound was the howling wind and the crackling of distant fires. "The white man's promises are written in water," he said finally, "but even enemies deserve mercy in the death winter." He gestured toward the camp. "You may bring your people. You will stay separate. You will touch nothing without permission. When the storm passes, you will leave." Relief flooded through Scarlett. "Thank you, we will honor your conditions." As they turned to retrieve the others, Atsila's voice stopped them. "The red-haired woman stays as assurance while you bring the others." Holloway bristled. "Now hold on." "It's fine," Scarlett interrupted. "Go get them before they freeze." Holloway hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. As he trudged back through the snow, Scarlett stood alone, facing Atsila across 5 feet of pristine white ground. His expression remained unreadable, but something in his eyes, something knowing and assessing, made her heart beat faster. "You are not afraid," he observed, sounding faintly surprised. "I respect you," Scarlett replied evenly. "That's different from fear. For the briefest moment, something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. Then it vanished, replaced by the same stoic mask. "We will see," was all he said. Within hours, the settlers were huddled in a large hide structure at the edge of the camp. The Apache had provided firewood and water, but otherwise kept their distance. Scarlett moved among her fellow travelers, helping distribute blankets and prepare a simple meal from their dwindling supplies. "That savage keeps watching you, Mrs." Peterson whispered, nodding toward the entrance where Atsila stood conferring with two warriors. "He's ensuring we keep our word," Scarlett replied firmly, "and he's no savage. He's shown us more mercy than most white men would in similar circumstances." As night deepened, the storm intensified. Scarlett stepped outside briefly, needing a moment away from the close air of the shelter. The wind had died down, but snow continued to fall in thick, silent curtains. The world had narrowed to this small circle of light amid a vast wilderness. She sensed rather than heard Atsila approach. "Your people fear what they do not understand," he said, materializing beside her like a shadow given form. "Most people do," Scarlett replied, not turning to look at him. "Fear is easier than understanding. Why are you different?" The question surprised her. She glanced at him, finding his eyes intent upon her face. "I've lost everything once already," she said simply. "It teaches you to see beyond your fears." Something in his expression shifted, almost imperceptibly. Before he could respond, a commotion erupted from the Apache camp. Warriors rushed toward the horse enclosure, shouts cutting through the night stillness. Atsila was moving instantly, his hand briefly touching Scarlett's arm. Whether to warn her to stay put or simply from instinct, she couldn't tell. The brief contact burned through her coat sleeve like a brand. Minutes later, Holloway was dragged before Atsila, blood streaming from his nose. Two Apache warriors held him, while a third led Holloway's horse, already laden with supplies. "Caught him stealing horses and food," one warrior reported in their native tongue, which Scarlett couldn't understand. Atsila's face hardened into something terrible and beautiful, like carved obsidian. "You bring dishonor upon your people," he said to Holloway, his voice dangerously quiet. "We offer shelter and you repay with theft." "You don't understand," Holloway pleaded. "We won't make it to Arizona without more horses. Our supplies are almost gone. I was just trying to ensure your survival at our expense," Atsila finished. He looked toward the settlers' shelter where concerned faces peered out. "Is this how all your people repay kindness?" Scarlett pushed forward. "No," she said firmly. "His actions were his own, not ours. We won't defend them." Holloway glared at her. "You ungrateful woman, I was trying to save us all." "By stealing from those who saved us from the storm?" Scarlett retorted. "You've endangered everyone with your foolishness." Atsila studied her for a long moment before addressing the settlers. "The penalty for horse theft is severe, but I will offer a choice. Return to the lowlands immediately tonight with what you brought, or leave one person here as surety while we determine proper reparations." The settlers erupted in protests and fearful murmurs. To venture into the storm meant certain death. To leave someone behind seemed equally terrible. "I'll stay," Scarlett said, her voice cutting through the chaos. Atsila's eyes narrowed. "You offer yourself." "I do." She met his gaze steadily. "These people need to reach the next settlement safely. I trust you will treat me fairly while terms are negotiated." A strange expression crossed Atsila's face, something between respect and suspicion. "So you trust too easily, Firehair." "Not easily," she corrected him, "but when earned." For several heartbeats they regarded each other, something unspoken passing between them. Finally, Atsila nodded once. "So be it. When the storm breaks, the others will continue their journey. You will remain." That night, as Scarlett helped the settlers prepare for their departure at first light, Mrs. Peterson clutched her hand. "We'll send help," she whispered, "as soon as we reach Taos." Scarlett smiled tightly. "I'm not concerned. Honor matters to them. I'll be treated fairly." But as she glanced across the camp at Atsila, who sat alone by the central fire, his face illuminated by dancing flames, she wondered if she had understood the true nature of the danger. Not physical harm, perhaps, but something far more threatening to her carefully guarded heart. The way he looked at her, as if he could see beneath her skin to the secrets beneath, made her feel both exposed and awakened. Like a dormant seed suddenly touched by spring rain, something long buried inside her had begun to stir. And that, Scarlett realized with a chill that had nothing to do with the winter air, might prove more perilous than any storm. Dawn broke with cruel clarity, the storm having exhausted itself overnight. The world glittered white and blue under a sky so vast it seemed to swallow the mountains whole. The settlers prepared for departure in subdued silence, their fear for Scarlett mixing with relief at their own reprieve. Atsila had assigned 2 warriors to guide them to the nearest trading post, a 3-day journey in good conditions. Holloway, thoroughly disgraced, was bound at the wrists, his future uncertain. "You shouldn't do this," young Thomas Peterson told Scarlett as she helped load the final wagon. At 16, he was caught between boyhood and manhood, his admiration for her painfully obvious. "Let me stay instead." Scarlett squeezed his shoulder. "Your mother needs you, Thomas. I'll be fine." As the caravan disappeared into the tree line, Scarlett stood at the edge of the camp, suddenly aware of her solitude among people who owed her nothing. Atsila approached, his footsteps silent on the packed snow. "They will reach safety," he said, misreading her concern. "I know." She turned to face him, chin lifted. "What happens now?" "Now you learn our ways." Something that might have been amusement flickered in his eyes. "Since you chose to stay." "I didn't have much choice." "There is always choice." His gaze was direct, challenging. "You could have let another stay. The boy who watches you with moon eyes." Heat touched Scarlett's cheeks. "Thomas, he's just a child." "No longer a child." Atsila's observation was matter-of-fact. "But not yet a man." He gestured toward the center of the camp. "Come, you will stay in my sister's dwelling. She is called Nayeli." As they walked through the camp, Scarlett felt the weight of curious stares. Children peered from behind their mothers, and warriors paused in their tasks to watch her pass. She held herself straight, refusing to show discomfort. Nayeli proved to be a woman perhaps 5 years older than Scarlett, with the same proud bearing as her brother. Her English was limited but functional. "You work," she said simply, handing Scarlett a basket. "Not guest." Scarlett nodded. "I understand." The days fell into a pattern. Scarlett rose before dawn to help the women prepare the morning meal. She learned to scrape hides, to mend garments with sinew thread, to identify which plants could still be found beneath the snow. Her hands, once smooth, grew calloused and strong. Atsila watched her from a distance, his expression unreadable. When their paths crossed, he spoke to her with the same clipped directness he used with everyone. Yet sometimes she would look up to find his eyes upon her, dark and intent before he turned away. One morning, 2 weeks into her stay, Scarlett was kneeling by the stream that ran near the camp, breaking ice to reach the water below. Her hands were numb with cold despite her hide gloves. "You do it wrong," Atsila's voice came from behind her. "The ice is thinner upstream beneath the cedar." Scarlett didn't turn. "Then perhaps someone should have told me. Perhaps you should observe more carefully." He crouched beside her, his body radiating heat in the bitter air. "My people watch before they act. You whites always rush forward, then wonder why you fall. Is that what you think I'm doing? Rushing blindly?" "I think," he said slowly, "that you are neither blind nor rushing, which makes you dangerous." She looked at him then, startled by his candor. "Dangerous? I'm one woman among your entire tribe." "Yes?" His eyes held hers unflinching. "One woman who does not break, does not complain, does not weep when others would. One woman who watches and learns and adapts." His voice lowered. "I wonder what you seek to gain." "My freedom," she answered honestly. "Nothing more." Something shifted in his expression. "You have more freedom here than many of your white women. No corsets, no men telling you to be silent." Scarlett laughed, a short, surprised sound. "Is that what you think? That I'm reveling in this captivity because I can go without a corset?" For the first time, she saw genuine amusement cross his features, a slight softening around the eyes, the barest upturn of lips. "I think you are not truly captive at all. You chose to stay. To protect innocent people. Yes, honor." He nodded as if confirming something to himself. "A warrior's choice." Before she could respond, he rose and walked away, leaving her confused by the exchange. Had that been a compliment, or was he mocking her? That night, As the tribe gathered around the central fires, an elder began to speak, his voice rising and falling in rhythmic cadence. Though Scarlet couldn't understand the words, the power of the storytelling transcended language. "He speaks of changing woman," Nayeli said softly beside her, "who transforms like the seasons, who brings life after winter's death." Scarlet watched the old man's weathered hands move through the air, painting invisible pictures. "It's beautiful," she murmured. Across the fire, Atzila's eyes caught hers, firelight dancing in their depths. For a moment, neither looked away. Later, as she helped clear the remains of the meal, a commotion at the edge of camp drew everyone's attention. 3 riders approached, led by the scouts who had been watching the mountain passes. Atzila moved to meet them, his stance alert. The newcomers were Apache from another band, their clothing and decorations subtly different from the Jicarilla. The leader, a warrior with a prominent scar across his cheek, dismounted and greeted Atzila with formal gestures. Scarlet continued her work, trying not to appear too interested. Nayeli, however, had gone still beside her. "What is it?" Scarlet whispered. Nayeli's expression was troubled. "Kemi," she said, nodding toward the scarred warrior. "He comes for Atzila's answer." "Answer to what?" But Nayeli had already moved away, approaching the men with downcast eyes to offer water to the visitors. Scarlet finished her tasks, acutely aware of the tension that had settled over the camp. That night, Scarlet awoke to the sound of raised voices. Careful not to disturb the others in Nayeli's dwelling, she wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and moved to the entrance, peering out into the moonlit night. Atzila and Keme stood at the edge of camp, their profiles sharp against the snow. They spoke in their native tongue, the conversation clearly heated. Keme gestured emphatically, pointing toward the east, while Atzila stood with arms crossed, his posture unyielding. As she watched, Atzila said something that made Keme step back as if struck. The scarred warrior's hand moved to his knife, and for a heart-stopping moment, Scarlet thought violence would erupt. Then Keme spat on the ground between them, turned on his heel, and stalked back to where his companions waited. Atzila remained motionless, watching them go. When they had disappeared into the darkness, his shoulders sagged slightly, a gesture of weariness Scarlet had never seen from him before. Without thinking, she stepped from the dwelling's entrance. The sound of her movement caught his attention, his head turning sharply in her direction. For a long moment, they regarded each other across the sleeping camp. "You should be asleep," he said finally, his voice carrying clearly in the still night. "So should you," she replied, drawing the blanket tighter. He approached her, moving with the silent grace that still unnerved her. When he stopped before her, she could see the tension in his jaw, the carefully controlled anger in his eyes. "Your people think they know us," he said, his voice low and intense. "They call us savages, yet they are the ones who break treaties, who speak with forked tongues." "I'm not responsible for what others do," Scarlet said quietly. "No." His gaze was piercing. "Your people are coming. Soldiers. They build a fort in the valley to the east." Understanding dawned. "That's what he wanted, for you to fight them." "Unite against them," Atzila corrected. "All Apache bands together." His laugh was bitter, as if that would stop the bluecoats and their guns. "You refused. I choose survival for my people." His eyes burned into hers. "Even if it means compromise. That takes more courage than fighting," Scarlet said softly. Something in his expression shifted, became more vulnerable. "Does it? Or is it surrender dressed as wisdom?" Without thinking, she reached out, her fingers brushing his arm. "It's protecting what matters most." He looked down at her hand on his buckskin sleeve, and Scarlet suddenly realized the impropriety of her gesture. She began to withdraw, but his hand caught hers, holding it in place. His fingers were warm against her cold skin, the contact sending a jolt through her body. For several heartbeats, they stood frozen, connected by that simple touch. Then Atzila released her, stepping back. "You understand nothing," he said, his voice rough. "Go back inside." He turned and walked away, leaving Scarlet with the lingering warmth of his touch and a confusion that had nothing to do with language barriers. The next morning, Kemi and his warriors departed before dawn. The camp returned to its routines, but a subtle tension remained. Scarlet noticed more scouts being sent out, more weapons being prepared. Atsila was absent for most of the day, having ridden out with several warriors before sunrise. "Trouble comes," Nayeli told her as they worked together grinding corn. "Always trouble with whites." Scarlet looked up from her task. "Because of the fort?" Nayeli nodded grimly. "They want our mountains, our water." She pointed to the peaks rising around them. "Sacred places. But soldiers only see stones and trees to take." "Not all white people think that way," Scarlet said quietly. Nayeli gave her a level look. "You are different," she acknowledged, "but one flower does not make a meadow." That evening, Atsila returned, his expression grim. He conferred with the elders, while the rest of the tribe continued their evening tasks, casting worried glances toward the meeting. As Scarlet carried water from the stream, she rounded a stand of pines and nearly collided with Atsila, who seemed to have been waiting for her. "Your people have sent a treaty party," he said without preamble. "They ask about the settlers, about you." Scarlet's heart leaped. "They're coming to negotiate my release? They come with sweet words and soldiers hidden in the trees." His voice was hard. "I am not a fool. What will you do?" "Meet them. Listen." He studied her face. "They offer trade for your return." "I'm worth something then," Scarlet said with a brittle laugh. "More than you know." Something in his tone made her breath catch. "They come tomorrow. You will remain in camp out of sight." "You don't trust me," she realized. "I don't trust them." His gaze softened marginally. "But no, I do not fully trust you either. You are still of their world." The words stung more than they should have. "After all this time, I've worked alongside your people, learned your ways." "3 weeks is not all this time," he interrupted. "And learning our ways is not the same as being one with them." "I never claimed to be one of you," Scarlet retorted. "But I've honored every rule, every expectation." "Yes," he cut her off again, his voice gentler now. "You have." The simple acknowledgement silenced her protest. They stood looking at each other, the tension between them shifting into something else, something less adversarial, but no less potent. "Tomorrow," Atsila said finally, "will determine many things." As he walked away, Scarlet couldn't shake the feeling that he was speaking of more than just the treaty meeting. That night, she slept fitfully, dreams filled with soldiers and gunfire and Atsila standing between two worlds, reaching for her across an ever-widening divide. Dawn brought clear skies and a biting wind. Scarlet was directed to remain in Nayeli's dwelling, while Atsila and 5 warriors rode out to meet the treaty delegation. The hours crawled by, each minute stretching her nerves tighter. "Why do they keep me hidden?" she asked Nayeli, who sat calmly weaving a basket nearby. "Wouldn't seeing me alive and well help their negotiations?" "Atsila protects you," Nayeli replied simply. "From whom?" "My own people?" Nayeli's hands stilled. "From becoming leverage." She searched for the right word. "If they see you, they might try to take you by force. Then blood flows." "He's worried about my safety," Scarlet realized, surprised. Nayeli gave her an enigmatic smile. "My brother watches you when he thinks no one sees. Even when you first came, his eyes followed you." Heat crept up Scarlet's neck. "He was making sure I didn't cause trouble." "Is that what you believe?" Nayeli's smile widened. "Then you are not as observant as he thinks." Before Scarlet could respond, shouts erupted outside. They rushed to the entrance to see Atsila and his warriors galloping back into camp, their expressions thunderous. Behind them, dust rose from the trail leading back down the mountain. Atsila dismounted in a fluid motion, barking orders to the waiting warriors. The camp burst into activity, women gathering essentials, men checking weapons. "What happened?" Scarlet called, hurrying toward him. He turned, his face dark with rage. "Betrayal," he spat. "They brought twice the men they claimed, positioned in the rocks above our meeting place." His eyes blazed. "I felt their deception before I saw it. We left before they could spring their trap." "They were going to attack during peace talks?" Scarlet was aghast. "They want these mountains," Atsila said grimly, "and they think I hold you against your will, a perfect excuse for their rescue." His laugh was without humor. "I can talk to them," Scarlet offered. "Explain the truth." "The truth?" Atsila shook his head. "The truth is that white men have wanted us dead since they first came to our lands. No words will change that." He looked around at the frantic activity. "We moved to the winter camp in the high valley." It's defensible, with caves for shelter and hidden springs for water. And me? Scarlet asked quietly. What about me? For a moment conflict played across his features, the first time she had seen his emotions so clearly displayed. You have a choice, he said finally. Go to them, I will not stop you, or come with us. The choice he offered stunned her. You would let me go? Just like that? You were never truly a captive, he said softly. Only a guest with obligations. His eyes held hers. But know this. If you go to them, you cannot return. That door closes forever. With that, he turned away to continue organizing the tribe's departure, leaving Scarlet with a decision that suddenly seemed impossible to make. She stood in the midst of the controlled chaos, watching as the people she had lived among for 3 weeks prepared to flee. These people who had at first regarded her with suspicion, then grudging respect, and finally, a degree of acceptance. And Atsila, proud, honorable Atsila, who looked at her as no man ever had, not as property to be claimed or a prize to be won, but as an equal, a worthy opponent, perhaps even a worthy companion. The realization struck her with physical force. She did not want to leave. The thought was madness. These were not her people. This was not her world. To choose to stay would be to abandon everything familiar, everything safe. Yet when she imagined returning to the settler community, to corsets and subservience, and a life mapped out by others' expectations, something inside her rebelled. As the tribe prepared to depart, Scarlet moved with purpose toward her few belongings. Her decision made, she stepped into the light of a destiny she had never imagined, but which suddenly felt inevitable, like a river finding its course through ancient mountains. The journey to the high valley was arduous, winding through narrow passes where the snow had drifted shoulder-high. Scarlet rode behind Nayeli on a paint mare, her body aching from the unfamiliar motion after weeks of being on foot. Atsila led the procession, his straight back and watchful gaze never wavering. Since her decision to stay, he had said little to her. Though she occasionally caught him looking her way, his expression guarded. By nightfall, they had reached a sheltered basin high among the peaks. The winter camp proved to be a collection of more permanent structures, some built of stone against the mountainside, others traditional hide dwellings reinforced for the season. The tribe moved with practiced efficiency, reclaiming the space they had clearly used for generations. Scarlet helped where she could, though the altitude left her breathless. As darkness fell, fires bloomed throughout the camp, and the smell of cooking food wafted on the crisp air. You chose to stay. Atsila's voice came from behind her as she carried firewood to Nayeli's dwelling. Scarlet turned, balancing the bundle in her arms. I did. Why? The question was direct, his gaze unwavering. She considered deflecting, but found she couldn't. Not with him. Because the world I came from never truly felt like mine, she said honestly. And because... She hesitated. Because, he prompted. Because I'm not finished learning what you have to teach me, she finished, knowing it wasn't the whole truth, but unable to articulate the rest even to herself. Something in his expression softened. The blue coats will come looking for you. They will not understand your choice. I know. She straightened her spine. I've made harder choices before. Atsila stepped closer, taking the firewood from her arms. Their fingers brushed and the now familiar jolt coursed through her. Tomorrow, he said, his voice low, you will learn to defend yourself properly. If soldiers come, you must be ready. Scarlet nodded, strangely touched by his concern. I'm stronger than I look. Yes, he agreed, his eyes never leaving hers. You are. The following dawn found Scarlet in a clearing at the edge of camp, facing Atsila with a small knife in her hand. The blade gleamed dully in the early light, its bone handle smooth against her palm. A knife is an extension of your arm, Atsila instructed. Not a separate thing. Feel its weight, its balance. Scarlet adjusted her grip, trying to follow his guidance. When he approached to correct her stance, his proximity made her pulse quicken. Like this, he said, his hand covering hers, repositioning her fingers on the hilt. His chest brushed against her back as he guided her arm through a movement. Strike upward, then across. Use their strength against them. The lesson continued for hours, until sweat dampened Scarlet's clothes despite the cold air. Atsila was a demanding teacher, correcting every misstep, pushing her beyond what she thought herself capable of. Yet there was respect in his criticism, and once when she executed a move perfectly, genuine approval in his eyes. Days passed in similar fashion. In the mornings, Atsila taught her to fight and to track. Afternoons were spent with the women, learning winter crafts and food preparation. Evenings were for storytelling and music around the central fires. Scarlet found herself changing, not just in her growing physical strength and skill, but in how she saw the world. She began to understand the Apache concept of harmony with the land, the deep spirituality that infused their daily lives. The mountains that had once seemed merely beautiful now revealed themselves as alive with meaning, with history, with power. A week after their arrival at the winter camp, scouts brought news. Soldiers had reached the abandoned settlement below and were preparing to move higher. "They believe we flee out of guilt," Atsila told the assembled tribe, his face grim. "They come to rescue the white woman and punish those who took her." Murmurs of anger rippled through the crowd. One of the elders stepped forward, speaking rapidly in their native tongue. Atsila listened respectfully, then shook his head, responding in kind. Later, Nayeli explained to Scarlet, "The elder thinks you should go to them. Tell them you stay by choice. My brother says they would not believe, would only take you and still attack us." "He's probably right," Scarlet admitted, her heart heavy. "They see what they expect to see." That night, Scarlet found herself unable to sleep. She slipped from Nayeli's dwelling and walked to the edge of camp, where sentries kept watch over the valley below. The moon was almost full, casting silver light over the snow-covered world. "You should be resting," Atsila's voice came softly from the shadows. He stepped into the moonlight, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. "I couldn't sleep," she admitted, "knowing they're coming because of me. They come because of what I am, not because of you." He moved to stand beside her, looking out over the silvered landscape. "They would find another reason if you were not here." "Still," Scarlet sighed, "I feel responsible." They stood in silence for a time, the cold seeping through Scarlet's layers, despite the fur-lined moccasins and thick hide jacket she now wore. "You belong here," Atsila said suddenly, so quietly she almost missed it. "On this mountain. In this place." He turned to face her. "You have the spirit of these peaks in you, unyielding, enduring." The words washed over her like a benediction. "I've never belonged anywhere," she whispered. "Not truly. Yet you do now." His eyes were deep pools in the moonlight. "Strange, is it not, that you would find your place among those so different from yourself?" "Perhaps not so different," Scarlet said, finding courage in the darkness. "You value honor. So do I. You fight for your people. So would I. You love this land." She gestured to the mountains around them. "And I have come to love it too." Something shifted in Atsila's expression, a lowering of guards, a revelation of what lay beneath his careful control. "And what of those who dwell on this land?" he asked, his voice rough. "Have you come to care for them as well?" The question hung between them, laden with meaning beyond its simple words. "Yes," Scarlet answered softly. "More than I should, perhaps." Atsila stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "There is no should in matters of the heart," he said, lifting a hand to touch her cheek. "Only what is." His fingers were warm against her cold skin, and Scarlet found herself leaning into the contact, her eyes never leaving his. Something was happening between them, something inevitable, as an avalanche, as unstoppable as spring after winter. "Atsila," she breathed, his name a question and an answer both. He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to step away if she chose. But Scarlet didn't move, couldn't move, didn't want to move. When his lips met hers, the world around them seemed to still, as if the mountains themselves held their breath. The kiss was gentle at first, then deepened as Scarlet responded, her hands coming up to rest against his chest. Atsila's arms encircled her, drawing her closer, his strength surrounding but never overwhelming her. When they finally parted, Scarlet looked up at him in wonder. "This cannot be," she whispered, though everything in her rebelled against the words. "It already is," Atsila replied simply. "Has been since you stood before me in the snow, unafraid." His thumb traced the line of her jaw. "You called to something in me, fire hair, Something I did not know slept within. And if your people reject this, if mine call it betrayal, then they must learn, he said, his voice firm, or we will make our own path. The confidence in his words both thrilled and terrified her. This was no fleeting attraction, no momentary weakness. This was a warrior, a leader, declaring his intentions with the same certainty with which he led his people. I need time, Scarlett said honestly. This is all so unexpected. A small smile touched his lips. Like a flower blooming through snow? She nodded, returning his smile. Yes, beautiful but fragile. Not fragile, Atsila corrected, taking her hands in his. Strong, like all things that survive winter. He released her gently. Take your time. I am patient. As they walked back toward the camp, a shout broke the night stillness. One of the sentries was racing toward them, calling out in the Apache tongue. Atsila's posture changed instantly, alert and dangerous. What is it? Scarlett asked, alarm rising within her. Riders, Atsila said grimly. Coming up the eastern trail. At night. Soldiers. Or settlers seeking revenge. His face hardened. Either way, they come with bad intentions. The camp erupted into controlled activity. Warriors took defensive positions while women and children moved to the cave shelters. Atsila barked orders, his voice commanding but calm. He turned to Scarlett. Go with Nayeli to the caves. She shook her head. I can fight. You've taught me. Not well enough for this. His eyes softened momentarily. Please, Scarlett, I cannot focus if I worry for you. The use of her name, the first time he had spoken it, struck her deeply. She nodded reluctantly. Be careful. Always. He touched her cheek once more, then turned away, already calling for his horse. The caves were warm and secure, hidden behind a narrow entrance that would force any attacker to come in single file. The women had prepared well. Water, food, weapons and medicines were stored inside, and the children were settled in the deepest recesses. Nayeli positioned herself near the entrance, a rifle across her lap. Gift from Mexican trader, she explained, when she saw Scarlett's surprise. I shoot better than most men. Hours passed with agonizing slowness. Scarlett paced the cave floor, her mind conjuring terrible images. Finally, unable to bear the waiting any longer, she approached Nayeli. I need to see what's happening, she said firmly. I won't interfere, but I can't sit here blind. Nayeli studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Stay low. Stay hidden. She handed Scarlett a small knife, just in case. The night was alive with tension, as Scarlett crept through the shadows toward a rocky outcrop that overlooked the camp's eastern approach. The moon had set, but stars provided just enough light to make out shapes below. A group of men, perhaps 20, had dismounted at the edge of the camp. They weren't uniformed soldiers, she realized, but civilian men carrying rifles and torches. At their head stood a familiar figure, Jeremiah Holloway, the guide who had tried to steal Apache horses weeks earlier. Atsila and his warriors had formed a line between the intruders and the camp, outnumbering them significantly. Yet they held their position, neither retreating nor attacking. Holloway's voice carried in the still air. We know you have her, savage. Hand over the woman and we might let you live. The woman you speak of is not a prisoner, Atsila replied, his voice steady and clear. She remains by choice. Laughter rippled through the group of white men. No white woman chooses to live with Indians, one called. You've bewitched her or worse. Leave these mountains, Atsila commanded. You trespass on sacred ground. Sacred? Holloway spat. This land belongs to those who can hold it, and that ain't you red devils for much longer. Scarlett's blood ran cold as she realized their true purpose. This wasn't a rescue mission at all. It was an excuse for violence, for taking Apache land. Her presence was merely a convenient justification. Without thinking further, she rose from her hiding place and began making her way down to the confrontation. She needed to put an end to this before blood was shed. As she reached the edge of the clearing, Atsila sensed her presence, his head turning slightly in her direction. The momentary distraction was all Holloway needed. Now! He shouted, and one of his men fired a shot into the air. From the darkness of the tree line came more men, a second group that had circled around while Holloway distracted the Apache. The ambush had been carefully planned. chaos erupted. Atsila shouted commands as his warriors divided to face threats from two directions. The night exploded with gunfire and war cries. Scarlet found herself caught in the open as bullets whizzed past. She dropped to the ground, crawling toward the cover of a fallen log. From there, she watched in horror as the battle unfolded. The Apache had the advantage of numbers and knowledge of the terrain, but the settlers had firearms and the element of surprise. Warriors fell under the onslaught, though they took many attackers with them. Through the chaos, Scarlet spotted Holloway moving along the perimeter, a torch in his hand. With sickening clarity, she realized his intent. He meant to set fire to the dwellings, to drive the Apache into the open where they would be easy targets. Without hesitation, Scarlet moved from her shelter, keeping low and using the battle's confusion as cover. She circled behind Holloway, gripping her small knife. When she was within 10 feet of him, a twig snapped beneath her foot. He whirled, his face contorting with surprise and then cruel satisfaction. "Well, look who decided to join the party," he sneered, lowering his torch. "Told the boys you'd be worth rescuing." "I don't need rescuing," Scarlet replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I chose to stay." Holloway's laugh was ugly. "Sure you did, sweetheart. Stockholm Syndrome, they call it. Don't worry, we'll get you back to civilization, make you right in the head again." "You're not here for me," Scarlet challenged. "You're here for land, for vengeance." "Smart girl." He stepped closer, the torch casting grotesque shadows across his face. "Though I wouldn't mind collecting you as a bonus. Always did find that fire in your eyes." "Interesting." Revulsion crawled through Scarlet's veins. "Stay back," she warned, raising the knife. "Or what? You'll stab me with that little pig sticker?" He moved with surprising speed for a man his size, grabbing her wrist and twisting until the knife fell from her grasp. "Your savage teach you that?" Not very effective. But Atsila had taught her more than knife work. As Holloway pulled her toward him, Scarlet dropped her weight suddenly, throwing him off balance. She pivoted, using his momentum against him, just as she had been taught. Holloway stumbled, cursing. The torch fell from his hand, rolling toward a patch of dry brush. Flames leaped up instantly. Scarlet lunged for her fallen knife, but Holloway recovered more quickly than she expected. His boot came down on her outstretched hand, grinding painfully against her fingers. "Nice try," he growled, reaching down to haul her to her feet. "But playtime's over." A shadow detached itself from the darkness behind him, silent, deadly. Before Holloway could react, an arm wrapped around his throat, yanking him backward. The pressure on Scarlet's hand vanished as Holloway was pulled away, struggling against Atsila's implacable grip. "Touch her again," Atsila said, his voice deadly quiet, "and you die where you stand." Holloway clawed at the arm around his neck, his face reddening. "Your people are finished," he gasped. "Armies coming." "Perhaps," Atsila acknowledged, "but you will not see it." He looked to Scarlet. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, retrieving her knife with her undamaged hand. "The fire—" Even as she spoke, warriors were already moving to extinguish the flames that threatened to spread from the brush to the nearest dwellings. The battle around them was dying down, the remaining attackers retreating into the darkness. Atsila released Holloway, shoving him to his knees. "Take your men and go," he ordered. "Tell those who sent you that the Jicarilla remain on their ancestral lands. We do not seek war, but we will defend what is ours." Holloway rubbed his throat, hatred burning in his eyes. "This ain't over, savage." "No," Atsila agreed coldly. "But tonight's part of it is." Under the watchful eyes of Apache warriors, Holloway and his surviving men collected their wounded and disappeared down the mountain trail, their torches dwindling to firefly points in the distance. As the tribe regrouped, assessing injuries and damage, Scarlet found herself trembling, the delayed reaction to danger finally setting in. Atsila noticed immediately, coming to her side. "You should have stayed in the caves," he said, but there was no anger in his voice, only concern. "I couldn't," she replied simply. "Not when I knew why they had really come." He touched her injured hand, gently, examining the bruised fingers. "Nothing broken," he murmured, "but painful. I'll survive." She looked up at him, searching his face for injuries. A cut above his eye was bleeding freely, and his left arm bore a graze from a bullet. "You're hurt." "Scratches only." His eyes softened as they held hers. "You fought well." Not well enough, she admitted. He disarmed me easily. Yet you stayed calm, used what I taught you. Pride tinged his voice. Few can do that in their first real fight. Around them, the camp was beginning to settle. The wounded were being tended, sentries doubled, defenses reinforced. The danger had passed, but no one would sleep easily that night. Nayeli approached, relief evident in her face when she saw Scarlet. "Foolish woman," she scolded, but her eyes were kind. "Coming to Medicine Lodge now, both of you." Her tone brooked no argument. As they followed Nayeli toward the lodge where the injured were being treated, Atzila's hand found Scarlet's uninjured one, his fingers entwining with hers. The simple contact steadied her, grounding her in the midst of the night's chaos. "They will come again," he said quietly, "in greater numbers, with soldiers." "I know." Scarlet squeezed his hand. "What will you do?" Atzila was silent for a long moment. "What I must," he finally answered, "to protect my people." The words hung between them, heavy with unspoken implications. Scarlet understood the choice that loomed before him: fight and likely die, or leave the mountains his people had called home for generations. And she understood, with crystal clarity, that whatever path he chose, she would walk it beside him, not as a captive, not as a guest, but as a woman who had found her place and her heart in the most unexpected of circumstances. "Whatever comes," she said softly, "we will face it together." Atzila's eyes met hers, something profound and tender passing between them. "Together," he agreed, the word both promise and prayer in the star-filled night. 3 days after the attack, the winter camp hummed with purposeful activity. Warriors strengthened defenses while scouts watched the mountain passes. The wounded were healing, including 3 warriors who had taken bullets but would survive. 5 of the attackers had not been so fortunate. Their bodies returned to their companions as a gesture of respect that Scarlet knew many white men would not have extended. She worked alongside Nayeli, preparing healing poultices from pine resin and herbs stored for winter. Her bruised hand had begun to heal, though it remained stiff and painful. "My brother speaks with elders again," Nayeli remarked, nodding toward the central lodge where Atzila had been closeted with the tribal council since dawn. "Many voices, many thoughts." "About what to do next?" Scarlet asked, though she knew the answer. Nayeli nodded grimly. "Some say fight, some say move to Canyonlands far west." She looked at Scarlet directly. "Some say you bring this trouble." The words stung, though Scarlet had expected them. "Do you believe that?" "No." Nayeli's response was immediate. "Trouble was coming before you. Trouble always comes with blue coats." She smiled faintly. "But you change my brother. This is good change." Before Scarlet could respond, the lodge entrance opened, and the elders emerged, their faces solemn. Atzila followed, his expression unreadable as he strode directly toward Scarlet and Nayeli. "Walk with me," he said to Scarlet, his voice low. They moved away from the camp in silence, following a narrow trail that wound between towering pines. Snow crunched beneath their moccasins, the sound sharp in the still air. When they reached a small clearing overlooking the valley below, Atzila stopped. "The council has decided," he said finally. "We will divide. The elders, children, and those who wish to avoid conflict will travel west to join our cousins in the Canyonlands. Those who choose to stay will make a stand here, in our sacred mountains." Scarlet studied his face, reading the tension in his jaw, the conflict in his eyes. "And you? What have you decided?" "As chief, I must lead those who go west," he said, his gaze fixed on the distant peaks. "It is my duty to ensure the survival of our people, our ways." "But part of you wants to stay and fight," Scarlet guessed. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "You know me well already." He turned to face her fully. "Yes, the warrior in me cries out to defend our land, but the chief in me knows that sometimes surviving is the greater victory." "When will you leave?" "Tomorrow, before dawn." His eyes searched hers. "And now I must ask what you have decided." Scarlet blinked in confusion. "What I've decided? Whether to come with us," Atzila clarified, "or return to your people." The question stunned her. "You think I would leave? After everything?" "I think," he said carefully, "that I must offer you the choice. The path ahead will not be easy. Long journey, uncertain welcome, hard life in new lands. And you think I would choose comfort over—" She hesitated, the word love catching in her throat. "Over?" he prompted, something vulnerable flickering in his eyes. "Over you," she finished simply. "Over us." Atsila moved closer, taking her hands in his. "There would be no shame in choosing your own people, your own world, I would understand." "My world is where I choose it to be," Scarlett said firmly, "and I choose to be with you, whatever comes." The relief in his eyes was palpable, as if he had been holding his breath for her answer. "Even knowing that many of my people still see you as outsider? That the journey will be hard, the future uncertain? Even then," she smiled up at him, "I've never shied away from difficult paths." "Why start now?" Atsila's hands tightened on hers. "Then I must ask a second question." His voice deepened, became formal. "Will you join with me, Scarlet of the Firehair? Will you become my wife in the ways of my people, and I your husband?" The question, so direct, so unadorned with the elaborate courtship rituals of her former world, took her breath away. Yet its very simplicity held a profound truth. Here was a man who knew his mind and heart, who did not play games with either. "Yes," she answered, the word emerging as naturally as breath. "I will join with you, Atsila of the Jicarilla. I will be your wife, and you my husband." Joy transformed his face, softening the warrior's hardness, revealing the man beneath. He drew her to him, his arms encircling her with gentle strength. When his lips found hers, Scarlett felt as though some final piece of herself had fallen into place, a piece she hadn't known was missing until she found it in his embrace. That evening, as stars began to appear in the deepening twilight, Scarlett and Atsila stood before the assembled tribe. The ceremony was simple yet profound, an exchange of promises, the tying of a single braided cord around their joined hands, prayers offered to the four directions. Nayeli had helped Scarlett prepare, dressing her in a beautifully beaded buckskin dress and weaving small shells and silver beads into her copper hair. "You are sister now," she had said, embracing Scarlett with genuine warmth. "True family." Not all faces in the gathering showed approval, but most did. The tribe had come to respect Scarlett's strength, her willingness to learn their ways, her choice to stand with them in danger. And they respected their chief's decision, a man they trusted with their lives and futures. As the ceremony concluded, an elder stepped forward, speaking words that Nayeli translated softly for Scarlett. "Two rivers joining become stronger than either alone. May your union bring strength to our people in days of trial." The celebration that followed was subdued, mindful of the journey that awaited at dawn, yet genuine in its joy. Food was shared, stories told, songs offered to the night sky. Scarlett found herself moved to tears more than once by the simple beauty of it all, this community that had become hers, this man who had chosen her as she had chosen him. Later, in the privacy of Atsila's dwelling, now theirs, husband and wife came together in the ancient way of all couples. Their joining was tender yet passionate, a discovery of each other that transcended the differences of their worlds. In Atsila's arms, Scarlett found a belonging she had never known possible, a completion that made her previous life seem like a half-remembered dream. Afterward, as they lay entwined beneath fur blankets, Atsila traced patterns on her bare shoulder, his touch reverent. "From the moment you stood before me in the snow," he murmured, "something in me recognized you, not as enemy, not as stranger, but as part of my own spirit returned to me." "I felt it too," Scarlett admitted, "even when I tried to deny it. Something inevitable, like the changing of seasons. The elders would say our souls knew each other in the spirit world, before we were born to this one." His smile was tender in the fading firelight. "That we merely found each other again." "I like that thought," Scarlett said softly, nestling closer against his warmth. "That we were meant to find each other, across all differences." They drifted to sleep, wrapped in each other's arms, their hearts beating in unison as the stars wheeled overhead, the last night they would spend in the mountains that had witnessed their unlikely union. Dawn came too soon, grey light seeping through the dwelling's entrance. The camp had been awake for hours, final preparations being made for the journey west. Those few who had chosen to remain behind, mostly older warriors who refused to leave their ancestral lands, stood apart, their faces stoic as they bid farewell to family members. Scarlett worked alongside Nayeli, loading essential supplies onto travois pulled by the tribe's strongest horses. The mood was solemn but determined, a people who had faced adversity before and would face it again with dignity. As the caravan prepared to depart, a scout galloped into camp, his horse lathered despite the cold. He spoke rapidly to Atsila, gesturing toward the eastern pass. "Soldiers," Atsila announced to the gathered tribe. "Many soldiers coming up the main trail, less than 2 hours behind." A ripple of alarm passed through the group. The western trail, their planned escape route, branched from the main path. The soldiers would spot them leaving. "We must go now," one of the elders urged. "Before they cut us off." Atsila shook his head grimly. "Too late. They would see our tracks in the snow, follow us easily." His face hardened with resolve. "We need a diversion." Understanding dawned on Scarlett with horrible clarity. "No," she breathed, moving to Atsila's side. "You can't." He met her eyes, his own filled with a mixture of determination and regret. "The few warriors who chose to stay cannot hold the soldiers long enough. I must lead them, draw the blue coats away from the western trail." "Then I'll stay with you," Scarlett insisted. "No." His voice was gentle but firm. "You must go with the others. Help lead them to safety." "I won't leave you to die," she protested, gripping his arm. "Who said anything about dying?" A flash of the old fire lit his eyes. "We will lead them on a chase through these mountains that they will never forget, and then vanish like mist." He took her face in his hands. "I will find you, Firehair. This I swear by all that is sacred." Tears burned in Scarlett's eyes. "How?" "The canyon lands are vast." "I will follow your spirit," he said simply, "as I believe you would follow mine if our positions were reversed." She wanted to argue further, to refuse to be parted from him, but the needs of the many outweighed her personal desires. The elders, the children, the future of the tribe itself depended on a successful escape. "3 moons," she finally said, her voice steady despite her tears. "I will wait for you for 3 moons. Then I will come looking for you myself." A smile touched Atsila's lips. "I would expect nothing less." He kissed her then, fierce and tender at once, a promise sealed with passion. "Go now. Help Nayeli lead our people west. Be strong for them, as I know you can be." The parting was swift, necessity overriding emotion. Scarlett mounted the paint mare, positioning herself near the front of the caravan beside Nayeli. Atsila gathered the warriors who would remain, 15 in all, their faces set with grim determination. As the caravan began moving quietly along the western trail, Scarlett looked back one last time. Atsila stood tall against the morning sky, his hand raised in farewell. She committed the image to memory, her husband, her warrior, her heart's unexpected home. Then she turned forward, straightening her spine, drawing strength from the knowledge that she carried not just her own hopes now, but those of an entire people. And something else too, a secret she had only begun to suspect, a new life growing within her womb, a child of 2 worlds, conceived in love beneath winter stars. The journey west was grueling, a test of endurance through frozen passes and wind-scoured plateaus. Scarlett rode until her body ached, then walked to spare the horses, then rode again. She helped the elderly, carried exhausted children, hunted alongside the few remaining warriors when food grew scarce, and each night she gazed eastward, sending her thoughts like invisible threads back toward the mountains, where Atsila fought to give them time to escape. "He lives," Nayeli assured her one evening as they huddled near a small fire, the canyon lands finally visible in the distance. "I would feel it if my brother had gone to the spirit world." "I believe that too," Scarlett replied, her hand resting unconsciously on her still flat stomach. "I feel him sometimes, as if he walks beside us." Nayeli's perceptive eyes noted the gesture. "You carry life," she said softly. "A child of the chief." Scarlett nodded, not surprised that Nayeli had guessed her secret. "Yes, created the night we were joined." Joy lit Nayeli's face. "The continuation of our people, even in exile." She placed her hand gently beside Scarlett's. "This child will be special, born of 2 worlds but belonging fully to ours." "As its mother now does," Scarlett agreed, feeling a sense of peace despite the uncertainty that still lay ahead. The Jicarilla band was welcomed by their relatives in the canyon lands, a harsh but beautiful country of red rock and hidden springs. The newcomers integrated into the existing settlement, sharing their skills and learning new ways suited to this different landscape. Scarlett's pregnancy became visible as winter gave way to spring. The Canyonland Apaches accepted her with cautious curiosity, especially after learning she carried Atzila's child. Her willingness to work hard, to learn their dialect, to adapt to their customs gradually earned their respect. 1 moon passed, then 2. Scarlett's body changed, rounding with new life while her eyes continued to scan the horizon each dawn and dusk. The promised 3 moons approached, and she began making preparations for a journey eastward, despite Nayeli's protests. "You cannot travel in your condition," her sister by marriage insisted. "The child comes soon." "I gave my word," Scarlett replied stubbornly. "If Atzila does not come by the 3rd full moon, I will go to find him." "And risk both your life and the baby's?" Nayeli shook her head. "He would not want this." Before their argument could continue, a shout went up from the canyon's entrance. Scarlett's heart leaped to her throat as she hurried from the dwelling, one hand supporting her swollen belly. A single rider approached the settlement, his horse moving wearily after a long journey. Even at a distance, Scarlett would know that straight-backed figure, that proud bearing. "Atzila," she whispered, then louder. "Atzila." She moved as quickly as her pregnancy would allow, tears of joy streaming down her face. The entire settlement emerged to witness the chief's return, voices raised in welcome and celebration. Atzila dismounted in a fluid motion, his eyes finding Scarlett immediately. He stood motionless for a heartbeat, taking in her transformed body, understanding dawning in his eyes. Then he was moving toward her, covering the distance between them in long strides. They met in the center of the settlement, neither caring about the audience that surrounded them. Atzila's hands cradled Scarlett's face, his eyes drinking in every detail as if to reassure himself that she was real, that he had truly found her. "You came," she said simply, her voice breaking with emotion. "I promised," he replied, his thumbs wiping away her tears. Then his gaze lowered to her rounded belly, and wonder transformed his face. "A child?" Scarlett nodded, taking his hand and placing it against the spot where their baby kicked vigorously. "Your son or daughter," she confirmed, "created the night we were joined." Atzila dropped to one knee, his ear pressed gently against her belly, his hand splayed protectively over the new life they had made together. When he looked up at Scarlett, his eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "The greatest gift," he said softly, "hope in the midst of struggle." That night, after the celebration of Atzila's return had finally quieted, husband and wife lay together in their new dwelling, bodies entwined, despite Scarlett's advanced pregnancy. Atzila's hand never left the swell of her belly, as if he could not bear to break contact with the miracle growing within. "Tell me what happened," Scarlett urged gently. "After we parted." Atzila sighed, the sound carrying the weight of all he had endured. "We led the soldiers deep into the mountains, drawing them away from your trail. For days we played a game of cat and mouse, appearing, disappearing, leaving false trails." "Were any lost?" Scarlett asked, dreading the answer. 3 warriors. Sorrow deepened his voice. "They died with honor, covering our escape when the soldiers finally cornered us near the high ridge." He pulled her closer. "The rest of us scattered, agreeing to make our own ways west. I traveled alone, moving by night, hiding by day. And the mountains? Our winter camp? Taken," he said grimly. "The blue coats established a stronger presence. More settlers arrive each moon." His jaw tightened. "But mountains endure beyond the span of men. One day, perhaps, we will return." "And until then?" Scarlett asked, placing her hand over his where it rested on their child. "Until then, we make a life here," Atzila replied, his voice gaining strength. "We raise our child in the ways of the people. We endure, as the Apache have always endured." He kissed her gently. "And we remember that home is not just a place, but the people with whom we share our hearts." As if in agreement, the baby kicked strongly against their joined hands, bringing smiles to both parents' faces. "Already a warrior," Atzila murmured proudly. "Like father, like child," Scarlett agreed, nestling closer into her husband's embrace. Outside, stars wheeled across the vast desert sky, the same stars that had witnessed their unlikely union in the mountains, now overseeing the continuation of their story in this new land. Different terrain, same hearts, bound together by a love that had transcended barriers of culture, language, and expectation. 2 weeks later, after a labor that tested even Scarlett's considerable strength, a son was born as dawn painted the canyon walls with golden light. Nayeli served as midwife, her experienced hands guiding the new life into the world, while Atsila waited anxiously outside, as was the Apache custom. When the baby's strong cry announced his arrival, Atsila was called inside. He entered reverently, his eyes moving from his exhausted but radiant wife to the small bundle in her arms. "Oh, son," Scarlett said softly as Atsila knelt beside them, "strong and perfect." With gentle hands, Atsila took the infant, examining the tiny features with wonder. The baby had his father's copper skin and dark hair, but when his eyes opened briefly, they revealed a startling shade of green, Scarlett's eyes. "Nichi," Atsila pronounced, giving his son his first name in the Apache tongue. "It means friend, for he will be a bridge between worlds, a friend to all peoples." "And James," Scarlett added softly, "after my father, Nichi James." Atsila nodded his agreement, returning the baby to Scarlett's arms. 2 names for 2 heritages, but 1 heart, 1 spirit. As the canyon lands awoke to a new day, the small family huddled together in the dim light of their dwelling. A Scottish woman who had found her true home among the Apache, a warrior chief who had discovered that love could be stronger than tradition, and their newborn son who embodied the possibility of harmony between worlds that too often clashed in bloodshed. Outside, life in the settlement continued, women grinding corn, men preparing for a hunt, children playing among the towering red rocks. The rhythm of Apache life, unbroken despite displacement and loss, resilient as the land itself. And within this rhythm, Scarlett and Atsila had forged something new, a union that honored both their pasts while creating a shared future, a love that had begun in the snowy mountains of New Mexico and would continue in the sun-baked canyons of their new home. "I never imagined this path for myself," Scarlett murmured, gazing down at their sleeping son, "but now I cannot imagine any other." "The Creator's plan is often hidden from us," Atsila replied, his arm encircling her shoulders. "Until suddenly we find ourselves exactly where we are meant to be." As if understanding his father's words, little Nichi James opened his green eyes, gazing up at his parents with the unfocused wonder of the newly born. In that gaze lay all the promise of tomorrow, a future neither Scarlett nor Atsila could fully envision, but one they would face together, with the strength that had brought them through every trial thus far. A family forged in the fires of adversity, tempered by love, destined to leave their mark on the ever-evolving story of the American West, where boundaries were drawn not just on maps, but in the human heart, only to be redrawn by those brave enough to love beyond them. 5 years later. The canyon blazed with autumn colors as Scarlett stood at its edge, watching the sunset paint the rock walls with fire. Her hair, longer now and adorned with small silver beads, caught the dying light like burnished copper. Behind her, the Apache settlement had grown and prospered. New dwellings clustered around the life-giving springs, gardens flourished in carefully tended plots, and horses grazed in protected meadows. Though still officially in exile from their ancestral lands, the people had made this harsh but beautiful place truly their home. "Mother, look what Father taught me!" Scarlett turned to see 5-year-old Nichi James running toward her, clutching a small bow in his hands. Behind him walked Atsila, his face softened with the pride only a father can know. "He hit the target 3 times, Atsila reported, as their son reached Scarlett's side. "From 20 paces. "Did you?" Scarlett knelt to her son's level, admiring the bow. "That's very impressive." Nichi James beamed, his green eyes, so like her own, sparkling with achievement. "Uncle Key says I will be the best hunter in the tribe someday." "I believe it," Scarlett agreed, smoothing his dark hair. "But even the best hunters must rest. Go help your aunt prepare for the evening meal." As their son darted away, energy undiminished despite a full day of activity, Atsila moved to stand beside his wife. 5 years of leadership in this new land had added a few silver strands to his black hair. a few new lines around his eyes, but had done nothing to diminish the quiet strength that had first drawn Scarlett to him. "He grows more capable each day," Atsila observed, pride evident in his voice. "Strong in body, but also quick of mind. The elders say he asks questions they cannot answer." "He gets that from both of us," Scarlett said with a smile. "Stubbornness and curiosity, a formidable combination." They stood in comfortable silence, watching as the sun slipped behind distant mesas. Atsila's arm encircled her waist, drawing her against his side. "The trader brought news from the east," he said after a while, his tone carefully neutral. "The fort in our mountains has grown into a small town. More settlers arrive each season." Scarlett felt the familiar ache that always accompanied mentions of their former home. "And the Jicarilla who remained?" "Forced onto a reservation farther north," Atsila replied, his jaw tightening. "The sacred peaks are no longer theirs." "I'm sorry," Scarlett said softly, leaning her head against his shoulder. "I know you still hope to return someday." "Hope, yes, but my eyes see clearly." His arm tightened around her. "Our future is here now, with the people we have led to safety, the life we have built." He looked down at her, his eyes softening. "The family we have created." As if on cue, a small cry rose from the cradleboard Scarlett had set on a nearby rock. She moved to it, lifting their 3-month-old daughter into her arms. The infant quieted immediately, her tiny hand reaching up to touch her mother's face. "Little Enepe is hungry," Scarlett said, settling on a flat stone to nurse the baby. "She has your appetite." Atsila sat beside them, one hand gently stroking his daughter's wispy black hair. "And your spirit," he added, already so determined. They sat together as the first stars appeared in the deepening twilight, a family forged across boundaries of culture and expectation. In the distance, the sounds of the settlement rose and fell, children playing, women calling them to meals, men returning from hunting, the rhythms of a people who had faced adversity and survived. "Do you ever regret it?" Atsila asked suddenly, his eyes on Scarlett's face. "Choosing this life? Leaving your world behind?" Scarlett looked up from their nursing daughter, surprised by the question after all this time. "Never," she said firmly. "Not for a single moment. Even with all the hardships, the long journey, the struggles to establish ourselves here, the uncertainty of our future. Especially because of those things," Scarlett replied. "They have shown me the strength we have together." She reached for his hand. "In my old life I was alone, adrift. Here I found purpose, family, love." Satisfaction warmed Atsila's eyes. "The council meets tomorrow," he said. "They will formally recognize you as a voice among the women." Scarlett blinked in surprise. "Truly, I didn't think they would ever see past my white skin." "They see your heart now," Atsila said simply. "Your dedication to our people, your wisdom in counsel, your courage in adversity. The color of your skin matters less than the strength of your spirit." Pride and gratitude filled Scarlett's chest. Over the years she had worked tirelessly to earn her place, learning the language until she spoke it fluently, mastering traditional skills, offering her own knowledge where it could benefit the tribe. Still, formal recognition as a tribal voice was an honor she had not expected to receive. "I will serve them well," she promised. "I know." Atsila's smile held all the love and respect that had grown between them through the seasons of their shared life. "As you have served me well, as wife, as mother of my children, as companion on this journey." Little Enepe had fallen asleep at Scarlett's breast. She adjusted her dress and cradled the infant close, breathing in the sweet scent of her daughter's hair. From the settlement below, a call went up, Nietzsche James's voice, summoning his parents to the evening meal. Atsila rose, offering his hand to help Scarlett to her feet. "Our son calls," he said, amusement warming his tone. "The mighty hunter grows hungry after his day's exertions." As they walked back to the settlement, Atsila carrying their sleeping daughter while Scarlett walked beside him, they passed other families heading to their own evening meals. Greetings were exchanged, news shared, laughter rippling through the twilight air. Once these people had been strangers to Scarlett, their ways foreign, their language incomprehensible, their acceptance uncertain. Now they were her people in every way that mattered. She had learned their stories, shared their sorrows, celebrated their joys, contributed to their survival. And they, in turn, had embraced the copper-haired woman from across the ocean who had chosen their chief, borne his children, and dedicated herself to their welfare. What had once been strange had become familiar. What had once been foreign had become home. As they reached their dwelling, Nichi James bounded out to meet them, his energy undiminished as he chattered about his day, about the bow, about the rabbit stew Aunt Nayeli had prepared. Atsila listened with grave attention, treating his son's accomplishments with the seriousness they deserved. Scarlett watched them together, father and son, chief and future leader, 2 generations of a lineage that now carried both Apache and Scottish blood. In their bond, she saw the fulfillment of a promise that had been made years ago in the snow-covered mountains of New Mexico. A promise of 2 lives joined, of futures entwined, of love that transcended boundaries. Later, as darkness wrapped the canyon in its velvet embrace and the children slept peacefully in their beds, Scarlett and Atsila sat before the small fire in their dwelling. The day's work was done, tomorrow's not yet begun, and in this quiet space between, they found time to simply be together. "I received a letter," Scarlett said softly, reaching for the folded paper she kept in a special pouch. "From Thomas Peterson." Atsila's eyebrow rose. "The boy who watched you with moon eyes?" Scarlett smiled at his teasing tone. "He's hardly a boy now, 21, married with a child of his own." "What news does he bring?" "The settlers who traveled with me have established themselves in Arizona territory," Scarlett reported, scanning the letter. "They've prospered, it seems. Thomas asks if we are well, if I am happy." "And what will you tell him?" Atsila's question held no jealousy, only genuine curiosity. Scarlett set the letter aside, moving to sit beside her husband. She took his hand, tracing the lines of his palm, lines that had become as familiar to her as her own. "I will tell him that I found my place in the world," she said simply, "that I have a husband who sees me as I truly am, children who fill my heart with joy, a people who have become family." She looked up into Atsila's eyes. "I will tell him that I am not just happy, but complete." Atsila's other hand came up to cup her cheek, his touch as tender as it had been on that first night in the snow, when something unspoken had passed between them, something that had grown into the love that now bound them together. "As am I," he murmured, "complete." Outside, the night wind sang through the canyon, whispering secrets to the ancient rocks. Stars wheeled overhead, the same stars that had witnessed their unlikely beginning, now bearing witness to the life they had built together. And in the warm circle of their dwelling, Scarlett and Atsila held each other close, their hearts beating in unison. 2 rivers joined into one stronger current, flowing together toward whatever future awaited them. A future that, whatever its challenges might be, they would face as they had faced all others. Together, with the courage and love that had brought them across mountains and deserts, across cultural divides and personal fears, to this place of belonging. Together, always. Until the mountains themselves crumbled to dust. The end. Dear listener, as the last echoes of our tale fade into the quiet of the evening, I find myself reflecting on the journey we've shared through the snow-covered mountains and red canyons of Scarlett and Atsila's world. Their story, though set in a time long past, speaks to something timeless in all our hearts. Like Scarlett, many of us have faced moments when life's path took an unexpected turn. Perhaps it was a challenge that seemed too great to overcome, or a crossroads where the familiar route suddenly vanished. In those moments, we discover, as Scarlett did in those snow-covered mountains, what truly matters and what we're capable of. You've lived long enough to know that life rarely follows the path we imagine in our youth. The greatest joys often come disguised as detours, as unexpected meetings that change everything. Scarlett never planned to find love among people so different from herself, yet in that difference, she found completion. Think of the boundaries you've crossed in your own life, the moments when you chose courage over comfort, when you extended your hand to someone different, when you opened your heart despite past wounds. In those moments you embodied the same strength that carried Scarlett through her journey. The wisdom of your years has taught you what Scarlett learned in those mountains, that true resilience comes not from never falling, but from rising again with dignity. That family is found not just in blood, but in the bonds we choose to forge. That home exists wherever we are fully accepted and loved for who we truly are. As you rest tonight, know that your own story, with all its twists and turns, its mountains climbed and valleys crossed, is just as remarkable as any tale we could tell. The strength that has carried you through life's storms remains within you still, steady as the ancient peaks of the Sangre de Cristo. May you sleep peacefully, and may you awaken refreshed, ready to embrace whatever new adventure tomorrow brings, with the same courage that has brought you this far. Remember, as Atsila told Scarlet, mountains endure beyond the span of men. Your spirit, too, carries that same enduring strength, a quiet power that neither time nor trials can diminish. Rest well, dear friend. You are protected by the same stars that watched over Scarlet and Atsila, guided by the same inner compass that led them home. With all our gratitude, Wild West Whispers team. Thank you so much for joining us on this unforgettable journey through snow-covered mountains, across sacred lands, and into the hearts of Scarlet and Atsila. If this story moved you, if you felt the fire of their love, the ache of their choices, the hope in their child's eyes, we invite you to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel. From the bottom of our hearts, thank you for supporting us. Your love and encouragement keep us motivated to tell more stories filled with love, redemption, courage, and soul-stirring twists. At the end of this video, you'll see another recommended story from our channel. Click it and let yourself be swept away by another breathtaking tale. Thank you for being here. Wild West Whispers team.